there are moments when a house grows quieter, not because it's empty, but because something unspoken begins to settle into the walls. A jacket still hangs by the front door, his favorite one, the one he wore every morning to fetch the paper. The mail piles up, quietly unopened, and the teacup, once warm in her hands by 7 a.m. sharp, now waits untouched. No one says it aloud, but if you pause, if you really let the stillness speak, you might feel it. Something is shifting. These changes, they rarely arrive all at once. They come slowly, quietly, in smaller portions at dinner, longer naps, fewer phone calls, and glances that seem to linger just a little longer before looking away. Not all goodbyes are loud. Some happen gently, like the dimming of a lamp at dusk. And when they do, it's not giving up. It's the soul preparing for stillness, for peace. Often, we only recognize these signs in hindsight, when they've already become memories. When we whisper, if only I had known. But this isn't about regret. It's about presence, about noticing, listening, loving differently when time begins to grow thin. So stay with me. In just a moment, I'll walk with you through 5 quiet signs the body often offers in its final season, not to bring sorrow, but to reveal what's still sacred. And if something in these words speaks to something in you, I invite you to stay close here at Elderly Wisdom Story. Subscribe so you don't miss the moments that matter, because sometimes the softest stories carry the truths we need most. Sign 1. Letting go of time and routine. One of the earliest signs, so subtle it often passes unnoticed, is the quiet unraveling of time, not in hours lost to forgetfulness, but in how the clock itself begins to lose meaning. The days no longer move in neat squares across the calendar. Appointments are missed, not from confusion, but from disinterest. Meals are delayed. Morning routines grow softer or quietly disappear. You may find the newspaper untouched. The hallway clock stopped at 7:18, not broken, just paused, as if time itself is beginning to exhale. First, we may feel tempted to correct it, to nudge things back into order. But what if this gentle drift from schedule is not something to fix, but something to understand? What if, instead of fading, our loved one is entering a deeper rhythm, one that isn't measured in minutes, but in presence? This subtle letting go of structure isn't about giving up, it's about turning inward. The body and spirit begin to release their hold on the outer world, choosing instead the slow stillness of reflection. It's not a countdown, it's a soft preparation. And in that space, we too are invited to slow down, to meet them there, perhaps over a quiet cup of tea, or a soft tune on the piano. Maybe no words at all, just hands resting side by side, no longer bound by schedules, but held in timeless connection. Because when we stop pushing against the quiet, we begin to hear what it's really saying. Not that the end is near, but that the soul is gently shifting toward what comes next. Sign 2. Fewer words, deeper presence. There comes a time when conversations grow quieter, not because there's nothing left to say, but because the need to say it fades. The person who once filled the room with stories, with laughter, with questions, now sits more often in silence. The father, who used to tell the same childhood tale every Sunday dinner, now simply reaches for your hand, holds it gently, and says nothing at all. But in that silence, something sacred lives. It's easy to mistake this shift for disconnection, to worry that love is slipping away. Yet maybe fewer words don't mean less feeling. They mean deeper presence. As the body slows, so does the mind's need to explain, to entertain, to respond. And in that slowing, we are invited to listen differently, not to the words, but to the pauses, the glances, the way their eyes look for you when you walk into the room. Because love speaks in more than sentences. You may notice how a favorite song brings a soft hum, how reading an old poem aloud brings a quiet tear. These moments, they matter more than full conversations. They are whispers beneath the silence, saying, I'm still here, I still feel, I still remember. So instead of filling the air with questions or reminders, offer something softer, a quiet chair beside them, a familiar tune on the radio, or a few lines spoken together in a legacy letter meant to outlast us both. Because when words begin to retreat, the heart steps forward, and in that space, where language fades, we often find that love needs no translation at all. Sign 3, sensory withdrawal. Some shifts are so quiet, they echo louder than words. You may begin to notice the television, once a soft hum in the background, now sits silent. The blinds stay half drawn. Even on sunny afternoons, a room once filled with conversation and motion now rests in stillness, wrapped in a hush that feels almost sacred. And you wonder, have they stopped caring? Have they lost interest in the world? But maybe it's not disinterest at all. Maybe it's the body's way of gently turning down the volume, quietly preparing for a softer kind of presence. As the end of life draws near, stimulation can feel overwhelming. Light too bright, voices too sharp, motion too fast. The world, once vibrant and full of color, now feels too much. So the senses, like the soul, begin to withdraw, not in fear, but in reverence. This turning inward doesn't mean they're gone. It means they're listening differently now, not with their ears, but with their whole being. A breeze through the window may speak louder than any sentence. The shadow of a quiet room may feel safer than the sharpness of the sun. They are not fading. They are returning to stillness. And in that stillness, we are invited to follow. Dim the lights. Let the room breathe. Sit quietly beside them. Let a favorite scent linger, or the birdsong drift gently in, because even in silence, something sacred is unfolding. The soul, before it sets sail, often longs for peace, and in choosing stillness, teaches us how to surrender with grace. Sign 4, releasing possessions with intention. There may come a moment when they begin giving things away. A watch left quietly on the edge of the dresser. A cookbook passed down with a folded note inside. A wedding ring pressed gently into your hand with just 6 soft words. Give this to your daughter. It might catch you off guard, might feel like they're giving up. But look again. This isn't about detachment. It's about intention. This is not surrender. It's storytelling. When someone begins releasing possessions near the end of life, they're not discarding what they've loved. They're choosing what deserves to remain. Each object becomes a vessel, a memory preserved in silver, in cloth, in worn paper edges. These aren't just things. They're echoes of a life well lived. And in this quiet, tender process, we're invited to bear witness, not to take, but to receive. Sit with them. Listen as they share the story behind the keepsake. Write it down or record their voice telling it. Help wrap these gifts in love, in meaning, in deep gratitude, so they no longer carry the weight of ownership, but the lightness of legacy. And when we see it this way, we stop fearing it. They're not letting go of life. They're passing it forward, one memory at a time. And in doing so, they teach us how to hold on, gently and with grace. Sign 5, sudden clarity and final gifts. And then, sometimes, just when the days have grown soft with silence and sleep, a moment comes, one that takes your breath away. Their eyes open wider than they have in weeks. Their voice, faint but steady, calls out a name long gone. Maybe it's their spouse, their mother, a childhood friend. They remember the wedding song. They say a full sentence with startling clarity. Or maybe they simply reach for your hand and whisper, "It's okay now." This is not confusion. It's not the mind playing tricks. It is something else entirely. A sudden light, a gift, brief, radiant, unforgettable. In these final hours, the soul often speaks with a kind of honesty, no longer shaped by time or pain. It knows where it has been, and somehow, it seems to know where it's going. When that moment comes, don't rush it. Don't try to explain. Just be there. Ask gently, "What's one thing you want me to remember forever?" Let that answer live in your heart, or write it down, or whisper it back to them, so they know it landed. Because in that final light, something sacred unfolds. Not loud, not long, but real. A farewell, wrapped in grace. A last gift, offered quietly from one soul to another. And if you're listening, not with your ears, but with your whole being, you'll carry the gift with you, long after the words have faded. There are moments when a house grows quieter, but not because it's empty. A jacket still hangs by the front door, his favorite one, the one he wore each morning to fetch the paper. The mail piles up unopened, and the teacup, once warm in her hands by 7 a.m. sharp, now waits, untouched. No one says a word, but if you pause, really pause, you might feel it. Something is shifting. These changes rarely arrive all at once. They come slowly, softly, in smaller portions at dinner, in longer naps, in glances that hold just a little more before letting go. Not all goodbyes are loud. Some happen gently, like the dimming of a lamp at dusk. And when they do, it isn't giving up. It's the soul preparing for stillness, for peace. Often we only recognize these signs in hindsight, when they've already become memories. When we whisper, "If only I had known." But this isn't about regret. It's about being present before it's too late. It's about noticing, listening, loving differently when time begins to grow thin. So stay with me. In a moment, I'll walk with you through 5 quiet signs the body often offers in its final season, not to bring sorrow, but to help you see what's still sacred. And if these words touch something in you, I invite you to stay with us here at Elderly Wisdom Story. Subscribe so you don't miss the moments that matter, because sometimes the softest stories carry the deepest truths.